Welcome to Point Blank, where we suss out the issues that matter. I'm Yvonne.
I'm Lynn.
It's been a rollercoaster day. Stock markets have been in a tailspin after US lawmakers rejected a bailout plan for the financial industry. While in our living room with us to analyze the effect of these latest market movements are regional economist CIMB-GK from CIMB-GK Song Seng Wun and Chris Koh, the Senior Group Director of Dennis Wee Properties. Thank you for joining us tonight. But first up, before we begin, well, we'd like to take a look at the extent of what's happened in the US last night, which will bring us to today's discussion.
There's absolutely zero confidence in what's going on here. None.
Gotta go! What is it? What price?
It all came crashing down Monday after Congress failed to pass a bill that would help rescue the nation's economy from financial disaster.
We're at the precipice of the apocalypse.
Without a rescue plan, we're on the edge of the abyss.
I have the order.
There was panic on the trading room floor as it became clear on the House floor that there were just not enough votes to get the $700 billion bailout bill passed. Stocks plummeted close to 7%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed down more than 777 points at 10,365. The Nasdaq fell 199 points, more than 9%, and the Standard & Poor's 500 index fell more than 106 points, or close to 9%. It was the biggest single-day point drop ever.
It's just pure disgust with the politicians.
Stunned traders called it a political move that could further cripple the nation's economy.
When the White House and the administration described a problem, we worked in a bipartisan way to have a legislation that would help stabilize the markets.
It wasn't the right time to get up in a soapbox and display political muscle. I think that people were taken aback by that, and then I think the vote reflected that.
Wary investors now wonder how the markets will recover from billions of dollars of bad mortgage debts, frozen credit markets, banks afraid to lend. Although the bailout bill failed to pass, analysts say it's not completely over.
Well, I think what it means is that some of those markets might continue to be frozen. We'll need additional assistance in order to thaw out, and I think that all eyes will continue to be on Washington.
Investor confidence has just shattered after this devastating day on Wall Street. Although investors know there will be some type of bailout plan, there's just too big of a question mark on when that will be and what the details will be. And they're worried that markets will continue to suffer until it's all resolved. In New York, Bonnie Ghosh, the Associated Press.
Well, and in the region, Asian markets recovered from their lows after government central banks made massive liquidity injections. Singapore Straits Times Index closed lower by 0.1% or 2.43 points, recovering from a massive 127-point fall at the opening bell. And here's a look at how blue chips are off opening lows today. That's right. Well, it's lots of gloom and doom from what we have seen in the video just now. We have heard huge words like we are the precipice of the apocalypse and the shattered
Edge of the abyss.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. When you're thinking and talking from the heart rather than from the head, that's the kind of, I suppose, words that come out quite naturally. Mm-hmm.
So what is your head telling you?
Well, my head tells me that basically a plan has to be passed. Essentially, there's no way back. You can't just leave it as it is. Essentially, what worthless paper there are now will become even more worthless if things are left unchanged. So essentially, you're trying to salvage a deal which essentially perhaps can put a floor underneath the whole financial market, and hopefully once that's stabilized, things can operate in a real economy. You take the analogy of a person's heart. Essentially, that heart is badly mauled now. That's the financial system. Mm-hmm. And what is being planned is to inject liquidity into that financial system to keep the heart going. And if it doesn't, if it seizes up, all normal businesses could completely be halted by this seizure in liquidity. So in essence, that's why I think many of those who voted against the plan, I think were only just thinking of their own individual re-election hope rather from the wider perspective of this is not a good plan, but we have to do something to basically bail out the financial system, keep the economy going, and then we deal with the issues subsequently. So perhaps, when the vote is retaken after tweaking of some words, the bill will pass. If not, I think we are indeed, on the verge of something pretty drastic.
So you are for the bill, I take it?
I think it's not the most, it's not the bill that will essentially cure all. It won't cure all. It won't prevent the U.S. economy from slipping into a recession. It is going to make a difference of a deep recession versus a depression, which probably will come if nothing is done. Because if the financial system seizes up, what will happen is one bank fall, many more will fall, many of the regional banks will fall, and essentially those homeowners, many of which are already in the process of being foreclosed or are foreclosing, might find that more wide-scale fall in the property market, home prices, and you're talking about a fairly severe depression type environment could basically sweep across the U.S. economy, travel across to the rest of the world, and even hit our shore, mainly because the U.S. economy, being our biggest market and trading partner, will have some knock-on impact on the services and the export sector of Asia and Singapore.
So do you think the U.S. is overreacting a bit with accordance to what you're just saying, given the importance of the bill?
Yeah, I suppose there's so much hope that this bill, after both the parties, Democrat and Republican, appears to have sort of endorsed the bill. But I think when it comes down to the wire, so to say, there's enough opposition, because as you can see, it was a fairly close vote, basically the difference being a dozen legislators making the difference itself. So that essentially says there's still fairly split opinion. Essentially what it tells us is that whereas the politician at the top and the policy planner, the Secretary of State Treasury and the central bank head, were busily convincing the head of the respective party, they have not basically appealed and explained the deal to the general population itself. As far as the general population is concerned, it's still about, why are you guys helping out those fat cats at Wall Street who have creamed us off for the last few years and making zillions of dollars, and now you're asking for help? No, bugger off. So, that's the kind of reaction that obviously is coming out now. So essentially it's telling them, look, we know they have done bad over the last few years, but we don't have a choice. If we don't help them out at this juncture, the consequence could be you could be out of a job and out of a home in the next coming few months.
Which leads me to the question, so it's happening well and good halfway around the world in the US, so should Singaporeans like me and Lynn and you and Lynn and everybody in this living room and everybody behind our cameras, should we be worried? Should we even care about what's going on?
We should, because you're talking about the largest economy of the world in terms of final demand, i.e. the stuff that are being made here, re-exported and reassembled in China, in Taiwan, or perhaps in Singapore, and so on. The US is still the biggest end market in terms of the tech market. For instance, the US account for essentially 20% of all output of tech product, be it handphone or iPhone or flat screen TV, for instance. So if there's a slowdown or a collapse in consumption over there, essentially export-oriented manufacturing industry in Asia, in Singapore, will be affected. Singapore has been doing very well from re-export, from being a financial center. So if financial institutions start to collapse, it will have an impact on where I work over in Shenton, where, for instance, firm will be significantly affected. Even, the guy selling char kway teow over at Bredel, will be affected, because he may be finding himself selling a couple more or a couple of less plates of char kway teow, basically because a couple of people who were working as cleaners in those offices suddenly find themselves out of the job, for instance. So it does matter to us in that the largest economy will be a drag on overall growth, and not just the US. Repercussion is that the rest of the world, i.e. the OECD countries, we already have seen several banks, like in UK, being nationalized. We are seeing European banks also being taken over as well. So that would also have a knock-on impact. End of the day, OECD countries, of which US and other major developed countries are the members of, account essentially for about 50% of our end demand. So if there slows down, we will inevitably be pulled down as well, although we will certainly not be in as big a deep a kind of a problem that they are facing, but it will certainly be some issue of job losses, company failures, etc., that we will be feeling on our shore here.
Talking about slowdowns, for Chris, you're in the property market. Do you see a similar effect in the property market with regards to the recent shake-up?
I'll say yes. I mean, to say no, I'll be lying. You will have an impact, but it's whether how quick. Fortunately, the property market has a lag time of sometimes 3 to 6 months. Things usually settles by then, we hope. All right, and I'm happy to say that in the last few years, the purchasers who had purchased properties, fortunately, did not take such loans. Unlike the last cycle.
Correct. Yeah.
In the last cycle, when they took a lot of loans, the moment when the economy went down, majority of them ended up having loans that were even larger than property values.
Yeah, I think
So,
that's the key
yeah.
difference. Really, there's a
That's
speculative element, isn't there? I can remember, back in the 90s when we had this last property
Yeah, that's
bubble.
right.
In my office, for instance, we can have clerks and admin officer, say, "Hey, let's pool our fund together. Let's buy property." Very different this time. You don't get that kind of feeling. Yes, there's some degree of speculation, but it's very limited. There's a lot more genuine buying.
Yeah,
I
there
think,
were a lot more foreign buyers,
Foreign
in fact,
buyers,
and these
yeah.
foreign buyers had the cash to purchase. So
Yeah.
if you speak to some bankers, they'll tell you that no, these foreign buyers did not take any loans at all.
Yeah.
So should the property prices come down, they're able to hold the property.
I
And
think
they
it's
won't
also
go
a
into
function
panic
of
selling,
the
yeah.
economy itself.
That's right.
As you can see from the overall population, the biggest contribution or contributing factor to the of nearly 5 million population is foreigner coming here. What they have done is they come to the Singapore economy and say, heck, rental is so expensive, perhaps it's worth my while to buy a
something,
property at this point rather than rent, because suddenly 6 months down the road, the landlord come calling again, we need to raise your rent again. So suddenly, from my anecdotal evidence, being a Malaysian over here, I've got many friends who came over and have to work here, be in the tech industry or in the medical field. They simply say, no choice, I have to buy. So they bought, and these guys have holding power. They have work, they have proper job. So they're not about to be retrenched, I think, as we've seen out there. So you got holding power, but the sentiment certainly has been affected, I
that's
think.
right.
Yeah.
Well, we already have some comments on our web from our viewers. iPod Touch Me says, you've got Amara here.
Well, it's
He
to
thinks
divert
that your
attention from the real
suspenders-
economy.
Your suspenders are so cool.
We're going to hang up the economy. That's what it's for.
Hang out the economy by suspenders. This
Yeah,
is
in
what
case
this
I
bill
lose,
is all about.
in
Suspenders.
case I lose small job, we've seen out there, I lose some weight.
You're wearing the analogy to our bill today.
Yeah, I mean, you've got two blacks here, and we've got two
Two
red
reds.
away.
Yeah, you've got
Balance.
a bit of a balance, a bit of suspending to do. Well, Black Kitten is asking what's today's topic all about. The US bailout or not, according to what happens. What happens in time to come. Red Devil has a genuine question here. Red Devil 72 asks, so much emphasis on this $700 billion bailout. Paulson has tried other bailouts before and they have all failed. What makes you think that this one will work? What if it doesn't? Would this be even worse?
Well, basically, no one knows really. As I said at the beginning, what we're essentially doing, I'm not a big supporter of this plan, but ultimately we have to try something. Essentially, is financial institutions, many of them are in trouble. Many of them hold a lot of these dodgy papers that that they've been stuck with because they've been too greedy. Bottom line is the law of greed out there. This payback for the greed that we have seen. So this paper are now essentially worthless. These are backed by essentially value of homes, which have now plummeted as a result of people out of the job, as a result of basically economy slowing down. So when you have value of homes falling, the value of the papers that back them are now essentially becoming more cheaper. So what is being planned now really is the government to step in and say, okay, we're going to buy this worthless paper and take it off the balance sheet of the bank. Okay, we don't know how much we're going to pay for them, but hopefully Mr. America in Minnesota, I beg your forgiveness. I need to take some more money and buy some of these dodgy banks, because if I don't, your neighbor might be out of work and out of a job in the coming months or so. I take this off the balance sheet of the bank, and they basically get a cash injection. They can operate as per normal. How? They can start the process of lending again to proper normal businesses that can operate, in this kind of environment. And with that, they can start the process of renewing economic growth again once you take that one off paper. So hopefully those papers, which are now belongs to the US government, essentially, hopefully when the market stabilizes, probably goes through a cycle, I've been noted. When it comes back again, this worthless paper will become less worthless, and hopefully a few years down the line, sell them, make some money along the line. So in essence, it is trying to rescue the financial system, the heart of the economy, in the process, therefore helping the overall economy. I would certainly be looking at another alternative, but they don't have so much money. Essentially, a lot of money have been committed to bailing out many of the banks already committed like 500 billion of the they don't have so much money. Essentially, U.S. government is running in heavy indebtedness at this juncture here. It's, again, as we've seen in Asia after the Asian financial crisis. I'm not sure whether many of you viewers are young enough to remember those days. The many homes which are basically being foreclosed or for sold, properties such as condominiums, factories, shopping malls, etc. So basically, these are now essentially worthless. So essentially, we set up an entity to buy all these to take all this property off the balance sheet of bank, because ultimately they belong to the bank because they lent the money to the owners to buy them. So the bank will sell them to this entity. Then every month they'll say, "I'm going to have an auction. There is block 323 of Ang Mo Kio up for sale. You want to go have a view? Come back and give me a bid." So that process of creating wealth will generate sort of a recovery on the property market. But that's not happening just yet. What we're essentially seeing is helping the financial system, the heart of the economy, i.e. to keep going, by giving them a little bit of liquidity, i.e. money, and then hopefully that will sort of stabilize the situation. This kind of environment, it will still lead to recessionary environment, because while you're helping the banks, you're not directly helping the economy creating jobs yet. That job losses will continue. So it will basically lead to further fall in property value, which basically means that the paper on which the paper which are backed by these homes may become even less. Well, it can be worthless than beyond worthless, can it be? Which is quite toxic at this point. Yeah. So it's really the whole idea. Take all this dodgy paper off their hand, put some value on them, give the bank some money,
get
a process of creating the juice of the economy going, and hopefully that will stabilize indirectly the housing market, and in turn, over time, stabilize the whole economy. So the whole process may take a long time, which is why at this point, whether the plan will work or not, we have absolutely no idea. It may fail miserably because nobody knows the value of the assets, or it may just get down to the job. But the bottom line is something must be seen, because it's all about confidence. If you don't have the confidence that something is being done, you don't know where the bottom is.
How long do you think it would take to finally get a bit of a handle on whether it will work, whether it will not work?
Don't know. We have to get it passed first. So in essence, I think over the next 48 hours, something will have to be done. It may not be, there is no plan B. It's either plan 1.1, 1.2, or 1.3 point.
That's the only plan we've got.
That's the only plan you got. There's no other sort of time in this sort of period. Sure. Because what we've got now at this point is that the election is just a month away. So by now, Congress ought to be in recess. The guys ought to be going home, making sure that they get re-elected as well. And rather than sort of being stuck in Capitol Hill and getting this bill passed, which is why it's of urgent importance that this bill basically got through in one shape or form or another. At least give the market some expectation that there will be something being done to perhaps stabilize. Because what it has done is that in this void, financial institutions are very reluctant to lend. Why does it matter? Again, it's coming back to you and I in Singapore here. Because of this global uncertainty of what will happen to the number one economy in the world, the number one engine, financial institutions basically say, this other institution that I lend to or counterparty risk with, I'm not sure whether he will be around tomorrow or not. He might be the next one to fall under. So I better hang on to my money for now rather than lend. So this process of hanging to your money seizes capital and liquidity, which means that proper businesses may not be able to function properly as the cost of funds, the cost of borrowing, shoot up, which why we have seen at earlier point that you raised that central bank around the world basically have been injecting lots of liquidity just to ensure that money is to go through the economy.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned just now that the jolts today makes for it's a healthy way of making for a recession environment. So we wonder whether Singaporeans and our dealers, investors are affected or even the least bit worried. Well, we'll find out more about that right after the break.